Hey guys, Mr. Pokke here, back with another video. So today we'll be marking the 9th episode of Pokke's Academy, and it is something that I guess will become more relevant as we play with the game, because with the release of Silver Wolf, we now have another character that helps us with defense reduction on top of Pella, because previously, before the release of Silver Wolf, the only sources of defense reduction we had in the game was with Pella, as well as the resolution light cone, right? So without further ado, let's get into today's content. To be able to dive into defense reduction, we first have to understand how defense works within Honkai Star Rail, right? So for all units, the base defense is the sum of their own defense as well as their light cone's defense at their respective levels. So as you can see from this formula over here, right? So this is in every single unit, there's no exceptions to this. The higher your light cone's levels go, as well as the higher unit's level go, their combined defense will act as the base defense that will serve for the future multipliers for whatever kind of skills, like your Fire MC, your Japat, all this kind of stuff. They will all be based on your base defense, right? So the higher a unit's defense, the less damage it will receive. I think this is pretty much a no-brainer, since it is a critical component of the damage formula in HSR, right? So this is the damage formula. So outgoing damage is equivalent to base damage multiplied by damage percentage multiplier, multiplied by your defense multiplier, which is a thing that we'll be talking about later on, multiplied by your res, your damage taken, your universal damage reduction, as well as the weakness multiplier. To find out more about this damage formula, feel free to check out Pridewind's website. They have a pretty excellent analysis as to Honkai Star Rail's damage formula, right? So similar to attack percentage, defense percentage from all sources are based on your base defense, right? So having more defense percentage will slowly reduce its effectiveness the more total defense a unit have. To show you guys how this really works in like glance, right? It's super straightforward. Is, for example, 10% of 1,000 defense. Let's say a unit's base defense is 1,000, right? So 10% of that is 100. So if you were to have a unit with 2,000 defense, this is your total defense, versus 3,000 defense, right? The bonus of this 10% defense is 5% and 3.33% respectively. So as you can see here, the higher your total defense is gonna be, then the less effective your defense percentage subsets are gonna get, right? So that's why we always say don't really need to stack that much of any sort of percentage sources, right? Whether it be attack percentage or even damage percentage, as you can see from my previous videos, and even now defense percentage. So try to find a balance of all things. So in terms of attack percentage, it's going to be balancing between attack percentage and damage percentage sources, whereas for the tankiness, a unit's survivability is going to be based on its basically effective HP, right? How much HP percentage you have versus compared to how much defense percentage you get. So this is for generally for tanks, like your Japat or FMC. If you want them to tank, you don't really want them to have defensive percentage mains and subsets, right? Maybe you need a little bit of HP just to make sure that they can actually survive. So that is how defense works. So with defense explained, this is how defense reduction / ignore works, right? So to understand this, you must first understand the defense multiplier, as seen from this formula over here. Your attacker level plus 20 divided by enemy level plus 20 times your 1 minus defense reduction and defense ignore plus your attacker level plus 20. So the detailed formula can also be found in Honkai Star Rail Wiki. Feel free to check it out in your own time. So a formula is just a formula, right? You basically just plug numbers into it and get some number out, right? But what can we derive from this above formula? Number one, defense reduction sources such as your Pella, your Silver Wolf, as well as the resolution light cone, it is the same line as defense ignore, like which is the one we have from Genius set. So going forward into the future, as long as we see any unit with like defense ignore or defense reduction, all this kind of stuff, they can all be clumped up into this line over here, which is going to be affecting our defense multiplier, right? So secondly, defense reduction and ignore, they're additive. So as you can see here, 1 minus this, right? They're not multiplicative, they're not divisive, they're additive, right? So the more you stack it, the higher your defense multiplier is going to get, right? Because the larger this number is going to be, then eventually this number is going to reach 0, right? Because the higher you're going to get from here is going to be 1 minus 1 equals to 0. So this entire chunk is going to go missing. So this is the highest amount of number we can get from our defense multiplier. And hence, this is going to increase our final damage, because our denominator here is going to be way lower when this becomes 0. So it's only going to be attacker level plus 20 divided by attacker level plus 20. So this is going to be the final stats when we reach 100% defense reduction, right? And lastly, the higher difference in levels between your unit and the enemy, the less damage will be dealt. because of this factor over here. But one important thing to note is, because if we are able to reach 100% damage reduction or damage ignore, then this entire chunk over here is going to become 0, right? Because anything multiplied by 0 is going to be 0. So in that sense, you can say that a person getting 100% damage reduction is going to give you a lot more benefits in the earlier levels, when the difference between you and the enemy's level is very high, right? Like for example, right now, let's say your units are level 60 against the enemy unit that's level 90, right? There's 30 levels difference, which you are definitely gonna get destroyed. But the moment you're able to get 100% damage reduction, then it only becomes your attacker level divided by attacker level, right? Because the enemy level completely goes out of the equation. So that's why defense reduction benefits players more when the level difference is very high, right? So that's the main things that can be derived from the above formula. So with that out of the way, let's get into a little bit of our in-depth example to let you guys see exactly how defense multiplier affects our final damage output. Right, so the example we're going to be using today is my Shu Sheng. She is level 67. I completely removed all her gears except for a little bit of speed just for this thing. So you can see here her attack is going to be 570, as well as the multiplier for her single target ability is going to be 80% of her final attack, right? So from our very first example, we'll find out that we have no damage reduction, so this is just straight up our level 67 Shu Sheng using her auto attack against a level 54 Guardian Shadow, right? So our defense multiplier here is going to be plugging from this formula, so we just plug in all the numbers, 67 plus 20 divided by 54 plus 20 plus blah blah blah. We're going to have a defense multiplier of 0.54. So after obtaining 0.54 from our defense multiplier, we can now find out how do we get this 2 to 1, right? So our base damage is 570, which is our attack, multiplied by 0.8, which is the multiplier of our scale. This is going to give us 456. Then 456 multiplied by 0.54 multiplied by 0.9 is going to give us 221.61, which is roughly equivalent to 221 over here. Our key thing to note is, where do we get this 0.9 and why is this formula the way it is, right? Just refer to our outgoing damage formula. So our base damage was the one that we calculated, which was our attack multiplied by our skill multiplier. Then we have no damage percentage multiplier because we are not recouping any gears. So Shu Sheng has no any extra damage percentage or any physical percentage. So this is going to be nothing. It's just going to be 1. Then defense multiplier is what we have obtained over here, which is going to be 0.54. And then rest multiplier is the same, just 1. Then damage taken multiplier is also the same, just 1. Now this universal damage reduction multiplier just essentially refers to, if an enemy is not broken, they'll receive 10% less damage from all sources, right? So they're going to be taking 90% of the total damage taken. So this is where we get the 0.9 from. And the last line is also irrelevant to us. So this is where, after plugging all the numbers, it's going to give us 221.61. So it basically aligns, nothing to see here. So our second example is going to show you how defense reduction work over here, right? So our second example, Pala's Talent. I use Pala's Talent over here for 20% damage reduction, right? So plugging into the 20% damage reduction into our defense multiplier formula, you can see that it's going to be 1 minus 20% over here. So it's going to give us 0.8, right? So everything else is still the same. We're still using the exact same stats. It's the exact same multiplier. I didn't level up our skills. It's still level 67 against level 54. So you can see that the defense multiplier, after accounting for 20% damage reduction, is going to be 0.595. So taking this 0.595 into the exact same formula over here, we're just changing the defense multiplier thing over here. Everything else is the constant. We're gonna get 244.18, which exactly perfectly aligns with our 244 over here. So this goes to show basically how any amount of defense reduction you make, you can just plug it into the formula and work very well, right? Now, lastly, we're gonna go to our highest possible defense multiplier that I can get with my current account. You can technically gain 100% if you're if you have the resolution light cone, or if you just level up your Pala's ultimate a little bit, you should be able to get 100% in the game right now, right? So how do we get this 389 over here? Exactly the same, we just plug in our 93.7 defense reduction, we're gonna give it over here. So this final defense multiplier is gonna be a 0.949, right? Really high, almost as close to 1 as possible, right? So after plugging in our 0.949 into our damage formula, we're gonna get 546 multiplied by all this, it's gonna be 389.46, which is almost exactly the same as our 389 over here. So this basically sums up how defense reduction works. Now, with all that being explained, I'm gonna go give you guys an example of why stacking defense reduction is really good in this game. This example is created by a CN content creator. I'll be linking his video down in the description below. But this is essentially what we have over here. So to roughly translate, this is a level 80 unit versus a level 90 enemy and its respective defense reduction benefits, right? So our first 0 to 20% damage reduction, the increased damage against the target is gonna be roughly 11.7%. And so this is our total final 11.7% increase. But for our next 20 to 40% defense reduction, we will now have an increase of benefits of 13.25%, and our combined final total damage increase is going to be 26.5%, right? And this goes even higher for our 40% to 60% defense reduction, which goes up to a benefit of 15.27% with a total benefit of 45.85% increase in damage. So what this essentially shows is for every increment in terms of defense reduction, right, the amount of benefits that each of these 20% give is going to be more and more and more, right? Our first 20% from 0 to 20 only gives us a benefit of 11.7, but by our final 40 to 60% defense reduction, it gives us now a benefit of 15.27. So going all the way to 100 essentially means the more defense reduction you stack, the more final damage increase you're going to increase with the increased defense reduction. So this just essentially shows stacking defense reduction in this game is really, really good. So with that, we have come to our summary. A defense multiplier is its own separate multiplier in the damage formula, and it's not affected by attack percentage, damage percentage, toughness, rest, all that kind of stuff. So you can feel free to go and stack your defense breaks, right? And it is one of the only multiplier in the game that can achieve a factor of 1 at 100% defense down, right? And thus, it has the potential to create the biggest increase in DPS within HSR, right? Because no other formulas are additive like defense down. So what I mean by this is basically what I referred to in the previous video. You can just keep stacking on defense reduction, of course up until to a point of 100%. It's one of the few very rare things that you can keep stacking without worrying about like diminishing returns, because unlike attack percentage and damage percentage, or even your raw defense percentage or even HP percentage, the more you stack them, the less effective they're gonna get. But this is the opposite case for defense reduction, right? The more you stack defense reduction, the greater the increase in DPS. So feel free to keep stacking them, right? So with defense reductions being debuffs as well, the effects on the boss lasts much longer when your team speed is higher, right? This is contrary to unit turn buffs, such as your Bronya buff, your Tingyun buff, all these kind of support buffs, right? Which loses effect faster when your team speed is higher. So this is gonna be an issue, especially going into the later stages of the game, where most of your team's speed are gonna be getting higher and higher, especially considering that in MOC, especially in the later levels, enemy speed are really, really high. So if your team speed is super slow, right, you might not be able to keep up with the enemy speed. So in a scenario where speed is actually very much preferred, especially for our supports to keep up with the enemy, then defense reduction is going to be a very nice stat to have, because it lasts really long when your team speed is higher. So some examples I can give in mind is basically for a team like Seele, right, because Seele is really high, pairing her with Silver Wolf or even Pella, decreasing enemies' defense is gonna be very beneficial for her, because she goes super fast, right? So if you give her a lot of buffs, like self buffs, like Tingyun buffs, then the buffs is gonna run out really fast because Seele is really fast, right? Whereas if we apply defense reduction on an enemy with Silver Wolf or Pella, then the debuff stacked on the enemy is gonna last much longer, irregardless of how fast Seele is. So this is just one example where defense reduction is really beneficial. So we've come to the end of today's Pokke Academy with regards to defense and defense reduction. So going forward into the game, especially when we get access to more and more units which may have defense reduction or defense signal in their kits, always keep an eye out for them, because I feel that they can always have a very solid placement in most teams, right? Like right now, even Pella and Silver Wolf, they both have really nice standing as a debuffer support. Silver Wolf is another category since she implants weakness, but even Pella, at the start of the game, we didn't really use her that much, but now we can see that how strong defense reduction stacking is gonna be, and it drastically increases the final damage that you can do against the enemy target. So that's all we have for today, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.